Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ankerstar Wealth Market Update. I'm your host, Allison Ankerstar, and today we'll be talking about Warren Buffett's annual letter to shareholders, Buffett's opinion on Apple stock, and the latest in Russia economic sanctions. But before we begin, as a reminder, this is a financial education presentation and should not be construed as personal financial advice. Full disclaimer information is available at ankerstarwealth.com. Good morning, Steve. Legendary investor Warren Buffett published his annual letter to investors on Saturday. He's 91 years old. Is his advice still relevant?
I tell you, Warren Buffett's been around a long time, and good on him for still, putting out his annual letter at 91 years old. And the ultimate answer is going to be yes. Of course, it's still relevant because he does the basics of investing, if you will. Value investing from way back in the day. He stayed away from technology, he says, but also, Apple's his number one stock. So it's kind of like he's come around to where true value is by staying away from kind of the glittery names, if you will, but going into what he calls the true value. If you remember, the old cigarette butts is what he used to talk about, finding those and getting the most value out of them. I did want to show you real quick, if you want to read his letter. It's not in the Ukraine, it's right here. So if you can go to cnbc.com, it's a little bit buried from the Ukraine news, if you will. So I just wanted to point this out. Just go CNBC Buffett letter. You can see it here. And then it's only, I think, 11 pages or so long. And a lot of it you can skip over because it's a financial recap, which most people aren't going to care about the finances of Berkshire Hathaway. But when you hear about what he said, he talks about the market valuation being expensive as a whole. Many people are saying that but there are pockets of value. And he talks about four big holdings that he has, on only one of which that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But that's Apple. We'll circle back to that. But when you think about his long-term investing perspective, I think is on point as far as, especially when you have something like the Russia-Ukraine situation kicking off, or you have inflation, or you have the Fed raising rates. Overall, his advice to stay the course with long-term investing is more relevant than ever.
Warren Buffett's top holding is Apple stock. Apple is also the top holding for Ankerstar Wealth. Is Apple really the best company in the world?
Well, I'm a little biased, and I'll say absolutely yes. But before I get into that, let me prove to you why. Alice, what do you think about their products?
Well, I have like 3 to 4 Apple products, and I think that I've gone through the majority of all the Apple products that they have, except for the Apple Pen. But I know my sister has that, and she absolutely loves it. But I've been a big Apple fan since like the 5th grade. All my friends used to have Apple, and I had a Samsung phone. And I would go to my dad and tell him, we need to switch to Apple. I need an iPhone. He was like, no, not right now. And then I was like, no, we need it. And so for the longest time, I pushed for Apple, and they skyrocketed completely right when we started to get into it. So I think that Apple is definitely the best company in the world.
Yeah, well, your pressure there to switch from Samsung phones, which we all had in the family, of course, to the iPhone was kind of what kicked us all off into switching over to the i set of products. And then you mentioned what do you have on your wish list from Apple?
Well, I'm going off to college this year, so I want a new iMac Pro, or what's it called? I think that's it. And then I also want a iPad and the Apple Pen. So I really think that those will be useful in college.
Well, it's good to have lofty wants. We'll see if those happen for you from the family there to get you set up for success in college. But yeah, I mean, to transition, even the little stuff like the iTags and the Find My iPhone capability and the iWatch. Those are so many capabilities out there that I really think it's pretty important going forward. Apple's basically doing everything right. My quick story with Apple is we were in the Middle East, and it seemed like everybody had Apple and everybody was FaceTiming. And this was before I even knew what FaceTime was. And the crazy part about it was I went and bought one of those little iPod Nanos, the little square ones. If you probably don't remember them, but for the, I picked up running as a habit, and I picked up one of these small things, and I remember being so impressed. I was already investing in the stock, but I was making fun of Apple users calling them iSheep. And I picked up this little thing, and when I unboxed it, it was like opening a Christmas present. I mean, the boxing was basically immaculate. And when I held the thing up and the cord just kind of unwound, the cord was like perfect. It wasn't that stupid Walkman, if you don't remember, but others do, from way back in the day, with that cord that crinkled up, or the earbud phones, the cord that was always like tangled and crappy. Anyhow, the cord fell straight down. I was like, wow, they actually figured out the cord, engineer perspective, kind of geeky. And then the second part was, so I didn't buy an iPhone then, but I went to Afghanistan. So I was in the Middle East when I bought the iPod Nano. I was living in Qatar, but I went to Afghanistan on a site visit where I would go around and talk to the commanding generals of the different provinces and talk to them about, air power and what if they were getting everything they needed from the Air Ops Center from where I worked. Did that on behalf of my 3-star at the time. Well, when I was up there, my friend Brian had the MacBook, and I had my old Windows computer. And no kidding, he would make fun of me every time we'd pop open the laptops, and he's like, "I'm already working. Are you working yet?" And I'm like, "No, it's still booting up." And he's like, "Yep, I'm already done now." But how fast everything worked with Apple. So I've been a big believer ever since. Obviously, Allison kicked us over into buying the actual products as a family for the phones, and now we have Apple stuff basically laying everywhere. But the question is it the best stock in the world? Of course it is. In my opinion, Warren Buffett votes with me, so I like that too. But here's a 3-year chart of Apple, and even with the big downturn you can see here in March of 2020 for COVID, it's just been screaming higher. You look at the earnings reports down there, and I don't know, I don't see any red. They just beat earnings every time. People love their stuff. It is truly a powerhouse, and some of the things they're doing with healthcare. With the watch monitoring your system, as well as the fall protection. Say if you have elderly folks that you're worried about, if you can get them to wear an Apple Watch, it does alert you if they fall. You can set that up. So I think we're just at the beginning of what Apple can actually do on the personal level. And of course, the rumored iCar should come out in a couple of years in 2024 as the number one challenge to Tesla for the robo-taxi role, which is a whole nother story I don't want to go into. But yeah, I think, in leadership, you have the horse and the jockey, as I talk about in investing all the time. Well, obviously, Apple's an amazing horse, but the jockey, Tim Cook, is completely, Warren Buffett called him brilliant. I have to echo that. I think he's the best CEO out there. And he's just, an amazing CEO. And, Apple is clearly the best stock in the world.
Last year, on day 5 of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the U.S. as well as several other countries have imposed economic sanctions on Russia in an attempt to get Vladimir Putin to back down. Are these economic sanctions going to work?
Well, I think that's a great question, and we've done this for years, right? So any conflict breaks out in the U.S. as well as other countries, start out with, hey, we're going to do some economic sanctions. And, I come from a military background where, you would primarily think use of force to get things done. But started to see the genius of this even when I was leaving the military back in 2012 timeframe. Of if you can hurt the pocketbook, you can really hurt folks. Largely, if you go back to the Cold War, we kind of, we didn't necessarily intentionally bankrupted Russia. They kind of bankrupted themselves with the arms race and trying to keep pace and everything. And eventually led to them backing down. So they've kind of seen this movie once, if you will, about running out of money. And I just don't think they want to go down that road again. So I do think the sanctions are going to work. There's a couple things I want to talk about specifically. First of all, you can see this article. There are some talks going on, so that's great news. Obviously, war is an atrocity. The loss of life is tragic, and our hearts go out to all the people involved from both sides. You tend to think of being in the military and going off and fighting in Iraq when it was kind of not necessarily a clear-cut slam dunk case that we were being sold. But the Russian troops that are out there, they're putting their lives on the line, and their families are sending their young folks out to the front lines. They're the aggressor, and of course, as an American, the Russians are the bad guys. But again, it's not the soldiers that are making those decisions, right? It's the evil leader, if you will, but putting them out there. So feeling for them as well. But as you look at, and it's glad the talks are breaking out. That's why I want to bring that up. But when you look at ratcheting up economic sanctions, well, first of all, there's a lot more with social media now than there ever has been. So people are actually reaching out for help. And when I say that, it's Ukrainian people largely reaching out to help. They ask for donations. A lot of it's been in crypto, which is kind of a little, rallying cry for crypto out there. But that's the Ukraine side asking for help. One thing before we get into that rate hike thing is I want to show you is this is an open letter to Tim Cook. We just talked about Tim Cook and the CEO of Apple. Look at this. Now, I found this on the internet. So, of course, anything on the internet could be totally make believe, like the Ghost of Kiev fighter pilot. But, okay. So it could be make believe, but it looks official. Dear Tim. And there you can see it's signed by the deputy prime minister. And it's basically appealing, them for Apple to cut off Russia from the App Store. You're like, what? It's kind of interesting of how bad that would, it hurts the population. But not physically hurts them, but it obviously affects them enough to where they can now ratchet up the pressure to maybe get their leadership to stop. So anyhow, it's interesting. Google this if you want, or pause and you can kind of read this. It's pretty short, but modern technology, it says, we need your support. In 2022, modern technology is perhaps the best answer to the tanks, multiple rocket launchers and missiles that are out there. So, they're taking a beating kinetically, and they're fighting back kinetically, but obviously all of the other technology stuff and economic stuff that we can put towards them is pretty good. In addition, if you didn't hear the stories, they reached out to Elon Musk, Elon Musk has several things going on in addition to Tesla. He's got his Starlink network of satellites that provides internet. And I believe, if I have my story straight, that he offered that for free within the country of Ukraine. So again, they can have the connectivity that they need to be able to talk to each other, to be able to defend themselves and not have to pay for it. Right. So literally, if everybody's, it's nice to see people on, changing their colors to yellow and light blue on social media. But for folks that are in position of power to do more than just verbally support or show a support, it's nice that people are taking the time to do that. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about before is the economic sanctions, and we're talking a lot about interest rates here in the U.S., and we are literally kind of, not freaking out, but certainly really concerned about what it's going to do to the economy if we move the interest rates off of 0, which is where we're at, up to potentially 7 rate hikes. And generally they're a quarter point, so that would be 1.75%. Okay, we're really worried about what that's going to do to our economy. Look at that headline. They didn't raise rates by 20%. They raised it to 20%. You talk about a holy crap moment. We're talking about taking a year going from 0 to 1.75 potentially. I don't even think we'll go that high. They went, and I'm trying to find the exact number, and I'm not going to find it in time. It was either at 8.5% or 9.5%, and they raised it to 20% as the baseline interest rate. 20%. Pretty much the free world is sitting around the 0 to 1% right now, and they raised it 20%. I think that's going to have just a crippling effect on their economy, and I think it's going to do it very quickly. So to answer your question, take down this article here. Economic sanctions are going to be more, I think going forward, going to be more important than ever. And I think that, regardless of how this turns out, as far as does he or doesn't Putin gain the territory that he wants to gain, the 2 provinces, if you will. Maybe he does, but maybe he doesn't. Either way, I think it's going to be a short-lived campaign. And I think the negative aftermath of this going in aggressively against Ukraine is going to cost him for decades. Because I think a lot of the economic sanctions that are in place aren't going to be rolled back very quickly. You see all kinds of, in sports, people, kicking Russia off of sponsorships, those sorts of things. So overall, I really do think that the financial pain will be too great for him to tolerate, short term, and this thing won't last hopefully for more than weeks, if you will. And in the long term, impact of it is truly unknown.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Please submit your questions as a comment through social media or directly to our email at vipservices@ankerstarwealth.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to get daily updates. That's all we have for today's show. I'm Allison Ankerstar, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.